In 1941, the last year of peace, the tempo of life in Kansas City was steady, established, regular. The people of Kansas City worked and played, and shopped and visited their friends as they had for years past. Day followed day in regular routine. About half of all the people who traveled within Kansas City rode on the buses and streetcars operated by Kansas City Public Service Company. Then came that earth-shaking attack on Pearl Harbor. Out of the dawn of December 7th came the planes, carrying their cargoes of death, droning steadily, relentlessly towards their target, preparing to blast an outpost into destruction, a nation out of its peaceful way of life. The whine of the motors drowned out the familiar sounds of peace. The shadows of the planes blotted out the hopes and happiness of an entire people. The crash of exploding bombs began a new era, the grim reality of war. The lengthening hours of that day developed sights and sounds to sicken the heart, to dim the eyes with tears, to call forth the bitterness and anger of a nation, and with it a firm resolve. This was the work of the enemy. This was his trademark. This was the infamy. This was the treachery that forced us into war. With the frenzy of war, the entire nation was galvanized into deadly, determined action. The induction centers were crowded with men ready to take up arms for their country, anxious to avenge the arrogant, cowardly attack. Employment skyrocketed in the war plants. The people went to war. And the streets of Kansas City, like those of every other American city, became crowded channels for the tide of men and women on the move. Bus and streetcar traffic more than doubled as high school students, grandmothers, housewives, out-of-towners joined the assembly lines of war. These war workers, charged with the job of making bombs and bullets, ships and planes, increased by the hundreds and the thousands. With the rationing of autos, tires, and gas, streetcars and buses had to carry the load. Local transit faced its biggest test in history. Joseph B. Eastman, appointed director of the Office of Defense Transportation, immediately issued directives to help meet the transit emergency. As Mr. Eastman stated early in 1942, we cannot escape blood, tears, toil, and sweat, and that means the civilian population as well as the soldiers and sailors. Life cannot go on as it does in times of peace. There will be all manner of hardship, and many will be hurt. The vital thing is to prevent any result which will cripple or impair the war effort. The problems were enormous. New equipment could not be had. Old cars standing in the yards ready to be junked, some of them already being burned, had to be brought back into the shops one by one. Not only was it imperative to conserve equipment already in service by the elimination of damaging, costly accidents, it was also necessary to recall these veterans of the road and rail. Old equipment was completely dismantled and completely rebuilt. Replacement parts were another war casualty. They could not be bought. So, old, worn parts had to be salvaged, rebuilt, reused. Completely rebuilt, renewed, repainted, the old equipment with many long years of service behind it again was ready for the road. The importance of local transit to the war effort was being clearly demonstrated day after day. No breakdown, no accident could be allowed to slow or stop the flow of workers to their jobs. Added to the shortage of equipment was another critical shortage, the shortage of manpower. More and more of our fellow workers answered the call to the colors. Not only were men needed to take their places, but many more operators were required to carry the vastly increased number of passengers. More and more new faces were seen in the offices, on the cars and buses. These new men had to be trained to understand the mechanics of the job, how to operate the cars and buses. But even more important, they had to be trained to realize the vital, all-important matter of safe operation. To realize that the fundamentals of safety are based on good operating practices. To grasp the fact that an accident can happen in the brief period of just 10 seconds. With 10 seconds to go, after an emergency occurs, thoughts and actions in that brief period usually determine whether an accident will happen or be prevented. Expert instructors continue the training program on streetcars and buses. To the new operator, the instructors again explain the functions and operation of the various controls. The operator gets the feel of the operation for himself when, for the first time, he takes the car or bus out on the road. Every day, on every run, car and bus operators are confronted with hundreds of emergency situations. These, the instructor points out, explaining how careful and alert operation can bypass a potentially dangerous situation, can prevent an accident. Knowing and observing the rules of safe operation assures a good record. Accidents in war or peace must be prevented. Accidents are home front defeats. The basic rule of safe operation: watch the road. You can't gossip with passengers and properly watch the road. It can be done, but not safely. Never relax your attention. It's the unexpected that's sure to happen. A few seconds of distraction paves the way for an accident. Failure of the operator to watch the road caused this accident. Just a few seconds of diverted attention. The results: an injured patron, an interruption to the regularity of service, lengthy reports, medical costs, possible damages, all because of a few seconds of carelessness. Remember, our job is service. When the operator is more interested in the stoplight than in giving good service to patrons, bad feeling results, and an accident is always possible. Public goodwill and continued patronage are dependent on courtesy and safe operation. Even though patrons sometimes seem unnecessarily slow in moving into the car or bus, attempting to save a second or so in closing the door too soon creates ill will, arguments, and often results in injuries. Schedules should be maintained, but a few seconds of thoughtless haste doesn't save time. Just a few seconds of carelessness. The cost: personal injuries, reports, and damages. A sudden start is always dangerous. Again, a few seconds of careful operation would have prevented this accident. The third rule: goodwill is good business. Keep your sense of humor. There are many strangers in Kansas City these days. Keep in mind that they are not familiar with the streets or our routes. Treat them courteously. If information is requested, a grouchy attitude won't help. It won't help the stranger, but it won't help the operator either. A complaint. That means reports and trouble for the operator. In dealing with the public, when information is requested, remember, it takes just a few seconds to courteously answer a question. It takes less effort to smile and be pleasant than to scowl and be gruff. And just a few seconds of courtesy, a smile and a pleasant answer, creates goodwill instead of ill will. It leaves a pleasant impression of you and the company, and will help make regular patrons out of casual riders. There's another angle, too. The grouchy operator is storing up ill will against himself and the company. Then, should this operator have an accident, his passengers won't be much interested in signing the witness cards or in helping him. The man who is courteous to his passengers gets along a lot better. Courtesy brings a courteous response. Then if the operator is involved in an accident, his passengers are glad to help him, and signed witness cards are very important. Furthermore, goodwill and friendly relations will help ensure more revenue and steady employment. The fourth rule, watch out for mechanical failures. Don't always rely on everything working right. The air brakes will stop a car, unless the air pressure fails. This time it failed. It failed because some inspector in the shop didn't take the few seconds necessary to make a careful inspection and repairs. Every track switch should always be in good working condition, but switches have been known to split. Such accidents are many times the fault of the switch repairman. A few seconds of careless inspection starts a string of events involving all departments. Not only was a private automobile damaged, the streetcar damaged, overhead torn down, but service was seriously interrupted. Such carelessness, which is inexcusable in time of peace, is criminal in time of war. The job is big enough. The job of maintaining regular transit service with limited manpower and limited equipment without the ugly costs of accidents. Every accident, no matter how minor, means an interruption to vital service. We cannot afford accidents. The fifth rule, watch the other fellow. The right-of-way may be yours, but the other driver may not stop at the stop sign. It doesn't help much to argue about the right-of-way after the accident. Regardless of whether he has the right-of-way or not, the operator should have his bus or car under control at all times. Don't assume the other fellow is going to do the right thing. Very often he doesn't. The only safe reliance for the operator is reliance on his own caution and careful operation. Always make sure that you've been given the right-of-way. Each man assumed he had the right-of-way. Neither man made or looked for a signal from the other. Had they done so, this accident would have been prevented. It's no use arguing now about who was at fault. Again, just 10 seconds of carelessness. Hundreds of dollars of damaged equipment. Now another important rule to remember. Keep back a safe distance from the car ahead. It's dangerous to ignore this rule of safe traveling distance. Otherwise, when the lead car suddenly has to stop, the following car can't always stop in time. It takes time and distance to stop any vehicle. For instance, in this case, from the time the operator realized he had to stop until he applied the brakes, during what is known as reaction time at 20 miles an hour, his car traveled 23 feet before he was able to begin braking. And the total distance up to the point of collision was 74 feet. Not enough distance to stop without a collision. Under normal conditions, with good brakes and dry track, this car would have taken a full 125 feet to come to a stop. There's just one lesson. Don't follow too close. Keep back a safe distance from the car ahead. A good operator knows the stopping distances of his car or bus. He knows that at 30 miles per hour, all vehicles during the operator's reaction time will travel approximately 33 feet. This is just a part of the normal stopping distance at 30 miles per hour. From the time the brakes are applied, the trolley bus will travel an additional 67 feet, or a total of 100 feet. The motor bus will travel a total of 120 feet. The PCC car will travel a total of 175 feet. And the older type streetcar will travel a total of 250 feet. These are average stopping distances at 30 miles per hour under normal operating conditions. 5 basic rules. Watch the road. Remember, our job is service. Goodwill is good business. Watch out for mechanical failures. Watch the other fellow. In brief, keep your mind on the job. Every time an operator takes his mind off his job, he's courting trouble. Too late. Just a few seconds too late. But this operator has all the rest of his life to remember. The police and the crowds and the wreckage are gone, but the costs and the worries have just begun to pile up. The damaged car must be taken to the shops. Maintenance work must be put aside. Men must be taken off their regular work in the shops. They must repair the damaged car. Our job requires that every piece of rolling stock be kept available for service. Then injuries may mean days or weeks or months in bed, may and often do result in permanent injury. Those few seconds of inattention may leave their mark forever, not only on the others injured in the accident, but on the operator himself. And no matter how serious his physical injuries may be, even worse are the pains of his conscience, the memory of the events which were caused by his neglect. Then there's the bad publicity of the courtroom trial. Before the eyes and ears of the curious, the bitter, the vindictive. The facts of the case to be laid bare before the jury, before 12 men you may have never seen before. Men who don't know you, don't care about you. Men whose judgment will be a judgment on you. Searching, searing, cutting questions, piling up the evidence bit by bit. Questions that you can answer in but one way, to your own detriment. Pointing up the main question in the case, were you at fault? And seeming to lead directly to but one answer. The attention of all focused on the man who was charged with causing the accident, with neglecting for just a few seconds the demands of his job, the few seconds that caused hours of delay and trouble, of injuries and agony. Thus do the costs of accidents add up. An endless series of checks, money needlessly lost, $5,000, $2,000, $150, $673, $4,700, $10,000, and on, check after check after check, day after day after day, hundreds upon hundreds, and thousands upon thousands of dollars, money down the rat hole, money that might have been saved, the cost of accidents that might have been prevented. During just one 12-month period, these costs add up enormously. A cost of over $500,000 for just 1 year. Money lost, not only to the company, but money out of your pocket. Money that might have been yours through the employee's participation plan. Then there is another, even darker side to this accident record. When war workers are injured in these accidents, they are prevented from getting to the job. Time cards left in the racks become mute testimony that the workers are not present. Lost time means lost production. Deficit supplies that weren't produced. If, on the ammunition conveyor line, there was missing just one box that wasn't produced on time, then that box may not have arrived in time. If somewhere, on some sector of one of our battlefronts, there's a lonely grave, we may have been the cause of his death. An accident may have started the chain of circumstances whose final link was found in that distant land.